morals, ethics, and what is right. What's up, folks? Justin Garcia, aka Master Chim here, and I am here with the white moral, Patrick Kelly, white boy Pat.
What's up?
And welcome to another episode of The Pressure Project. ThePressureProject.com is our website. Info@ThePressureProject.com is our contact email. ThePressureProjectMembers.com is our membership site. We now have almost 200 videos archived.
Episodes.
Including also the Loyalty Matrix Decoded series.
Yep.
The Warrior Continuum series. The special series that I've done so far. Along with the forum.
Yeah.
A couple of other incentives. Basically, if
Forum's
you've gotten forums also, if you've gotten anything out of the Pressure Project movement and the content that Pat and I put out all the time, we appreciate if you would give the membership site a chance. $25 gets you 3 months.
Yeah.
You could literally do it for 3 months, download every episode, and then just not continue. And we would be grateful for you doing so.
Yeah, 100%. The Loyalty Matrix series is alone.
And I've gotten that from a lot of
is
people.
Worth it.
A lot of people have said, that's worth the price of membership, and I appreciate that. And it's not going to stop there.
No.
We're constantly generating new content. So today we're going to talk about morality.
Yeah.
In a general sense, or as applied to our lives and as applied to the paradigm by which people discuss, use, and apply these terms.
Yeah.
Morals, ethics. What is right? We've had so many things going on nowadays that seem to bring up the necessity to articulate these concepts. I found it fitting that we hit it the way we usually do.
Yeah.
And give the whole topic the pressure treatment.
Yeah, we definitely did. The pre-conversation, before this conversation, was epic.
Right. So we have, before every episode, we usually sit down and we discuss, what we're going to cover. We don't like always doing things on the fly, although sometimes there's inherent value in that.
Sometimes that's fun.
When we have a topic-driven episode, we like to sort of get our ducks in order. We like to sort of get everything lined up and be prepared to be crushed.
Yeah.
And the session before this one was pretty productive.
It was awesome. Yeah. Very good.
So we're going to start off with some definitions. Some of these definitions are universal, meaning these are the definitions that you may have heard already.
Yep.
Then we're going to get into some bridges between what is commonly understood and what applies very readily to my loyalty matrix formula.
Yeah. This is going to be a great companion to the loyalty matrix.
Yeah, and for some, an eye-opener as to exactly how universal a lot of those concepts are. Right?
Yeah, 100%.
So let's start with the morals.
Morals.
And morals and ethics, the two first definitions we're going to start with. I got online. I got, just Googling it, finding an acceptable representation of what we all think are the definitions of these words.
Yeah.
And Google, the Googler, told me that morals are a person's standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and not acceptable for them to do, i.e., what is right for the individual. Ethics, however, are the rules of conduct recognized in respect to a particular class of human actions or a particular group or culture.
Yeah.
So when we look at morals versus ethics, sometimes people use them interchangeably.
Yeah.
And they are not the same thing.
They are not the same thing.
Moral, internal. Ethics, external. Moral, individual identity. Ethics, tribal identity.
Yeah.
Right? Something could be moral while not being ethical.
True.
Something could be ethical while not moral.
Yeah. To the individual, yeah.
To the individual. Everything's in reference
Correct.
to the individual when speaking morality.
Yeah. That's the thing where people get confused.
Right. So this leads us to another definition. And this definition is one that I use very often when discussing the loyalty matrix and identity comparisons and issues. And it's the concept of compatibility. So I define compatibility in this context as the percentage of congruency between two identities, or in this application, one's morals versus the group's ethics.
Yeah. Awesome.
When they are congruent completely, we say they are compatible. When they are completely incongruent, we say they're incompatible. And the level of which, these things do overlap, we say is their level of compatibility. All right. So now, when we're talking about morals and ethics, we're not necessarily talking about identity. So a lot of you that are familiar with the loyalty matrix know that identity is made up by the RPS formula: ritual, procreation, and survival. The individual can have an identity. What is it that you do? What is it that you do to constantly grow as an individual? What do you do to survive, right? That's the RPS represented for the individual.
Yeah.
Now, you also have RPS in a tribal sense. And tribal sense is, what do you do if I always use the example of a vegan, right?
Yes.
Vegan. What does a vegan do, right? Number one, tell everybody they're a vegan, right?
Yes.
Number two, they
Starve.
don't eat meat, right?
Oh.
No, they don't starve. They don't eat meat products or animal products. So there are things that one does ritualistically to help them assume the identity of vegan, right? In that particular application. But we know that the individual, the more the individual meets the identity, incongruency, or compatibility to the identity of the group, the phrases that we use, right, or the labels we use are open loyalty and closed loyalty. Closed loyalty is what everybody's moving toward. And it's really chasing perfection in a sense that we're never going to be, but for a snapshot in some instances, completely closed in our loyalty, which means when we have the individual and the tribe that individual is a part of, very rarely will their identities be completely congruent or completely compatible. It's usually some percentage of compatibility.
Yeah.
And it's really the strength of the tribe, you could say, another metric to acknowledge or to pay attention to is just what percentage of compatibility its members have.
Yeah.
To its identity. So, all this being said, morality, and just to repeat the definition again, morality or morals are a person's standards of behavior or beliefs concerning what is and not acceptable for them to do. So the notion of standards isn't necessarily ritualistic in a sense that it's not what they do, but it's really, I would say, a subset of what we would say is a component of identity. Now, your morals apply or provide a filter by which we look at all the different components of the RPS formula: ritual, procreation, and survival. One's morality dictates, what we're allowed to do, what we can or cannot do. One's morality dictates what is acceptable in a form of procreation, what's acceptable in terms of growing, right, as an individual. It also is something that is used as a filter when looking at methods or means of survival. What is acceptable for us to do in terms of survival of the individual? We all have a sense of sort of self-preservation, but if there is one escape pod to the spaceship and it's me or one of my children, I will put my child in the escape pod every day of the week.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So our morals sometimes dictate what's an acceptable version of survival. So morality, as it applies to an individual's identity, is really a filter by which what we think is acceptable.
Yeah, 100%.
And ethics is really that same concept applied to a group.
Yeah.
Right? So it's if you are, let's say, Christian, right? And you see this with a lot of Christians nowadays.
True. Yeah.
They identify themselves morally as Christians, as followers of the teachings of Christ. My opinion of those teachings aside. But they often find themselves in groups or tribes that ethically do not cater to their very individual morality. Right?
Yeah.
So because of the morality of the individual, it is almost an impossibility for them to be compatible with the ethics of the group.
That is correct. Yeah.
Right? Which means they are, by definition, going to retain an open loyalty.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to shake it
Right.
without completely changing what they believe in.
Right. And it's a limiting factor of their role of the tribe.
Yeah.
Because there is a point where they're just not going to grow past.
True. Yeah.
Because they would have to change the ethics of the tribe.
They would. Yeah.
To match their morality, because eventually it's going to be an issue.
It is. Yeah.
Right? Let's just say your personal morality says that I'm never going to kill.
Yeah.
Right? I'm
never going to kill.
Thou shalt not kill.
Yes.
That's why there was no murder in the Bible.
There's none.
Because thou shalt not kill.
Yeah, there's zero.
So let's just say that's your morality. And ethically, you are in a group that is more in tune with reality and nature.
Yeah.
And killing is a part of, the identity of this tribe.
Yeah, heck happens.
Killing animals, killing invaders, killing oneself. Who knows what the applications are. That is an example of how this can go badly very easily.
Very easily.
In those instances, I would say that the individual should be honorable enough.
Yep.
And I will use honorable to remove themselves from the group.
Yeah.
Because at a certain point, it is now honorable or ethical for the group to remove the individual.
Yeah.
And the applications of those removals can be, varied. It could be an exile. It could be a prompted conversation.
Sure.
That a dismissal.
Permanent exile.
It could be cement shoes.
Could be. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
exile from the planet.
Exile
from this plane of existence.
From this plane of existence, right?
Yeah.
Just go down, sit there.
Yeah.
Forever.
Just look at the flowers.
So it's,
let Jesus take the wheel. Right? He's taking it.
Because I'm about to put you in that motherfucker's car.
Yeah, he's the wheel's going to be all his.
So
that's why Christian drivers sometimes you can't trust them. Because at any moment,
Jesus could
take the wheel, and then what? Then what happens?
So
anyway,
anywho,
yeah.
So we talk about compatibility. It's something that everybody should pay attention to.
Yeah.
And just to reinforce so much of what I tried to stress with the language of the loyalty matrix in the past, we need to know what we stand for.
Yes.
We need to know what our identity is. We need to know what our filters of morality are. We need to see what groups we are finding ourselves in. There are going to be times where we're in groups that are too incompatible ethically with our morality, and something's got to give.
Yeah.
Because compatibility is a necessity.
It is.
When you're talking about closed loyalty.
Yeah.
Right? So the higher the compatibility, the higher the potential for closed loyalty. Compatibility is really a metric of potential, right? It's not the application or the result of somebody being completely loyal to another group.
Yeah.
The example that we've spoken about earlier was if you have one individual whose morality is completely compatible to a tribe and that tribe's ethics,
Yeah.
we can't say that there's close loyalty if they've never met.
Yeah.
So compatibility is just really an observation that the potential for close loyalty exists.
Yeah.
Right? But if they've never met in this particular hypothetical, we can't say that loyalty exists.
No.
Loyalty is now the acquisition, right?
Correct.
The function and result of participating internally in tribe.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people who listen to the podcast, we didn't know any of them.
Right.
But they had a like mind, and now there's a relationship formed that didn't exist otherwise.
Right.
You know.
So too often, one's individual morality is used to value what really should be reduced to compatibility.
Yeah.
I believe this, they believe that. They need to change, or maybe I need to change. When in my experience, what needs to be put at the top of the priority list is you need to go.
Yeah.
The argument for not removing oneself from a tribe for high levels of incompatibility are very few and far between in my experience. Very often I found that sometimes this group just isn't for you.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Right? And to sort of try and shoehorn one's morality into an incompatible group's ethical framework, that's when you see this discrepancy in the way one assesses who they become and who they are as a result of this.
Well, at a certain point, you're undermining everything. You're becoming the definition of a traitor.
Right. So to give a little insight with a little touch of controversy.
No way.
Yeah, I'll talk about something that I get shit for, and I'm relegated to the limitation of anonymous sources. But PTSD is a topic that is very, very significant in the world of the military nowadays.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of mounting evidence that there is a physiological component to what is being described as PTSD. That physiological component being represented in the studies of TBI, traumatic brain injuries.
Yeah.
Meaning your nervous system, your brain is damaged through trauma, sabotaging its ability to process information adequately, effectively, efficiently, which eventually leads to imbalances in perception and experience and paradigms and philosophy. And you have people like Junior Seau, right? Junior Seau, football player, shot himself.
Yep.
How does this guy shoot himself? Seems to be at the top of the world, millionaire, loved by everybody, but also somebody who was known for ramming his head into people 50, 60, 70 pounds heavier than he was, for years. Does that lead to a malfunctioning brain, which eventually leads one to think that suicide is the right thing to do? There is a valid growing body of evidence that suggests that is the case.
Yeah.
But then there is this other group. So I asked how do I phrase this? I asked a friend of mine.
Yeah.
A brother. If there are two circles, he's
in
the same circle I am.
Correct.
And I asked him about PTSD, and this individual would know.
He
would know.
That's fair enough.
And paraphrasing somewhat, the response was PTSD is for pussies. Now, that is a strong, strong statement.
Yeah.
But I'd like to think that we are strong individuals and we can process strong statements.
We can.
And not attach any emotion to it, but actually try and compute and process what that statement means.
We can.
Assuming, which I would say the assumption would be correct, that the individual who said this has the authority to say such.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is there is, and when you look at our military that's trying to validate transgender soldiers, trying to shoehorn women into combat positions, when you look at all the different things that are happening to our very politicized military, I don't think it's a stretch to assume that sometimes, and I say this with the caveat and disclaimer of not having ever been in the military, not having ever been in a combat zone, not that I've never been shot at, not that I've never had my life in jeopardy, not that I've ever, so I'm not completely naive and innocent to the world which I'm speaking of. But there is a possibility that the individuals, from time to time, as a representation of what our society has become and what our military is now allowing, are completely incompatible morally with the ethical obligations of being a soldier in today's world.
It is possible, yeah.
There was a time, and I talk about, I just got finished watching the Deadwood series.
Yeah, it's good.
And completely fiction, one of the greatest TV shows I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Al Swearingen. Arguably greatest TV villain ever.
Swearingen. Yeah, it's good.
Cocksucker.
But was he a villain?
What was he? You know?
Yeah.
One man's garbage, another man's gold, right? So,
yeah.
But of the time, and I know this is, with all the limitations of it being a TV show and a fictionalized account, of an era and setting in our history, I would contend that the idea of people being killed in the middle of the street, was a reality for a lot of people.
It was, yeah.
And as people settled the West, in America here, with the resistance of, the natives, with the greed inherent of the gold rush, with the very overbearing, powerful, land barons, like all of these things led to themselves. There was a reason why it was called the Wild West.
Yeah.
And because of the circumstances, of that environment, I don't think it's very, it's very mysterious how one could conclude that the men of that era were just cut from a different cloth.
True.
Life, death, resiliency, adversity, all of these things were part of everyday life. Well, we're now at the era of the leaves of our society, right?
Yeah.
So very quickly, what I mean by that is, we've had, due to our ancestors in this country, established incredibly strong roots, which have grown into this tree, the tree of liberty, some would say.
Yes.
And this very strong root and foundation that was established by generations past is now enjoyed by us. Some of us who are continuing to grow the strength through the trunk and branches of who we are in the face of history, but others of us now becoming these loud, colorful leaves that warrant the most attention, but are the weakest and contribute the very least to the integrity and structure of the foundation of this tree. So we have in our society now a whole lot of leaves.
Yeah.
Where I would argue in generations past, they were still growing that trunk.
Agreed. Yeah. 100%.
And nowadays, I don't think it's too much of a leap logically to say that we have people whose morals are just completely incompatible with the ethics of a life of violence.
Yeah.
I know plenty of people who are veterans, but I know other people who are combat veterans. Of these combat veterans, I know people who were able to either develop or who already had a compatible morality with the obligations and responsibilities of being part of the military's ethical standards and framework. I also know other people who were completely incompatible with what they were asked to do. And the sort of development, the manifestation of that incompatibility, I would very much say is often called PTSD.
That would make sense. Yeah.
A sort of sabotaged ability to process where morals and ethics begin and end. An uncertainty as to the validity of who the individual stands, being that maybe ethically he has gone through things, wanting to shoehorn himself into that framework, but now in the process has created such a rift in his own morality that this disparity exists.
Yeah. It causes a tumultuous internal conflict
that seemingly has no end.
Correct.
And no remedy. Right? So in the loyalty matrix, when I say, our identity being compatible with the group's identity, producing a closed loyalty, this is where we see the least amount of conflict.
Yeah.
And not only do we see the least amount of conflict, but because there is less conflict, there's less of a need to divert energies towards addressing, mitigating, repressing that conflict. Therefore, the individuals can divert those energies towards strengthening the tribe itself.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, that makes sense completely.
So, for me, I'm very careful about what groups I'm a part of.
As you should be.
As everybody should be.
Yeah.
And I think too many people don't pay attention to their own compatibility issues. They see them sometimes as limitations.
They want to get along with everybody.
They want to get along with everybody.
Yeah.
They want to do what they think is right without paying attention to exactly where their own individual identity lies in compatibility to the group with which they endeavor to do these things with.
Well, at a certain point, do they just give away their identity and they just absorb whatever group they're in?
Well, here it leads us to an interesting subset of the conversation, which is amorality and immorality.
Yeah.
So a man cannot be amoral by choice. He could be amoral through an indifference of ignorance. If I drove over a baby.
Okay. What did the baby do?
A little morbid, right? Let's just go right to the point. It's nighttime. A baby crawls onto the road. I don't see it. I think I just hit a rock.
It was a baby.
And the act was amoral. There was no morality because I was ignorant of what had happened.
You didn't go, hey, look, a baby. Let me get it.
So at most, we could be immoral. And immorality is just an assessment of one's morality by the external group.
Correct.
There are people, no matter how much we demonize certain figures through history, there are people who idolize those people as heroes. Imagine, having just taken my boys to the Genghis Khan exhibit
Yeah.
in Philly.
Awesome.
Incredible exhibit. Having just taken my boys there, imagine what the victims of Genghis Khan or those outside of his empire
Yeah. With the
that couldn't
volunteers.
sleep at night, right?
Yeah.
But couldn't sleep at night.
Yeah.
Imagine how they held Genghis Khan. They held him as a demon.
Yeah. Well, he gave him a chance. They just didn't
Well,
take
I'm not speaking about those people. I'm speaking about the people who are outside
Yeah.
of his
Okay.
influence, but certainly connected and in touch with his body of work.
The people he hasn't conquered yet. Is that what you're saying? People that know of him, but he hasn't.
Have yet to
Cross his
come
path.
into contact with
But
them.
they're kind of like anticipating it
Right.
to some extent.
Right. So these people, they're looking at him as a demon. So when we're talking about morality, it is important that first and foremost, and I guess this is really getting to the last leg of the title of the episode, what is right?
Yeah,
It has to begin internally.
it does.
It has to begin internally, because if it doesn't, then everything is going to be a sort of compromise of who you are. And the disparity between who you are and what you are willing to be for a group may be the end of you.
Yeah.
Now, how do we develop that morality? Well, we certainly follow and are influenced by the ethics of groups around us.
Yeah.
Right? I think we have genetic predispositions to certain moralities. I think that if we come from a fishing town, we don't have a problem killing fish.
I would, and if you do, you're in the wrong town.
Right.
Yeah.
So, there is a genetic predisposition. There is also just a proximity, influence. I grew up in the Bronx. I grew up in a primarily black and mostly Puerto Rican neighborhood. And the music I listen to, the language I use, the level of conflict that I'm comfortable with, all of these are, I would say, moral settings that were greatly influenced by the ethics of my environment.
True. Yeah.
I also know people. I remember as a teenager, I remember calling this this one young lady, right, who she and I had some choice words from one another during the course of an argument.
Sure.
I pulled out the C word, right? Cunt. That C word.
Yeah.
And I called her a cunt.
Uh-oh.
She slapped me right across my face.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
I was in shock.
Yeah?
I said,
Did you just slap me?
this girl just slapped me. Like, what do I do? I knock her out? Like, I was completely at a loss.
Headbutt.
I didn't know what to do. So I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I just got to sort this shit out.
Yeah.
I don't want to jump the gun.
I got to figure out what I want to do.
Like, I don't know where this is going.
This is the first time it happened.
Completely threw me off.
Yeah, sure.
Right? But then I've had other arguments with women of lesser caliber.
Sure.
Who the C word didn't make them bat an eye.
Nope.
So maybe those
They were like, yep.
right. So my morals that were developed around women who didn't mind being called cunts eventually led me to an ethical disparity and an incompatibility that got me slapped in the face.
Yeah.
I was about 14 when this happened.
Yeah.
14. And it was something to learn about, right?
Yeah. My mother slapped me once.
So, when we talk about incompatibility and how we have to really acknowledge, who we are, understand that a part of who we are certainly is going to be influenced by the ethics around us, right? By whatever, predispositions we have physiologically, genetically, but certainly culturally, certainly the nurturing influence of our environments. But that doesn't absolve us of squaring this shit away,
Yeah.
with purpose and intent. I think about scenarios all the time that really force me to explore where my morality begins and ends.
Yeah. Kind of
Where
mapping it out.
you have to map it out.
Yeah.
You have to find these boundaries, because when I am more familiar with these boundaries and I'm being honest with myself in their assessment, I now can more effectively be participatory
Correct.
in the tribes in which I am a member.
Yeah.
I am not going to join a Catholic church or a Christian church because I am incompatible. So in doing so, I would either have to sabotage and repress who I am as an individual.
Yep.
Or I would have to actively look to sabotage and overturn the identity of the group.
True. It's like showing up to AA with a 6-pack.
Right.
You're like, hey, guys, it's a different kind of meeting tonight.
And now if that's the thing I'm going to do, then let it be the result of a conscious decision to do so.
Yeah. True.
Make sense?
Makes 100% sense.
All right.
Awesome.
So let's get to the pressure player.
Pressure player.
Pressure player. Has he been a pressure player before?
Yeah.
I think he has, right?
Yep.
You'll find that incompatibility.
We might have did an episode specifically designed around him.
How awesome he is.
Yeah. There might be a T-shirt also that exists.
Right. It might be. Might have worn it yesterday.
Yeah. True.
Ragnar Redbeard.
That guy.
Pseudonym.
Yeah.
They say it's Arthur Desmond.
Okay.
They say it's Jack London. They say it's Nietzsche. I think Desmond's the most likely. We spoke about it.
Yeah, we talked about that.
If you're a member of the site, you can go back to the Might is Right episode where we actually talk about the book. But the essence of his morality is what makes him the pressure player for this episode. Partially because selfishly, so much of his morality is compatible with my own, or vice versa. But really because he's somebody who took the bull by the horns and said, this is what I believe. I don't care what you think. It is proven and supported by reality, by history, by logic, reason, experience.
Yep.
And he didn't make any apologies for it. I think there's maybe some hypocrisy there that he did it all through a pseudonym. But be that as it may.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when we have a faceless voice, we really pay attention to the words that much more.
Well, maybe he chose to do that for that reason. There is no one. We don't know.
Remove the straw man potential for the reason.
Correct. To say, oh, well, this guy in his personal life, he did this, this, and this, and he was doing this, and he was drinking, and he was on drugs. We have no idea. Just what he said is all that matters, all that exists, and that's all we need.
Right. Absolutely right. And with his work in Might is Right, you see a morality that is established with a respect for strength, with a respect for the power of intent, an acknowledgement for violence as a currency, in our dealings with each other and the world around us.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we get pushback, that his work is what spurred the skinheads or the Nazis or whatever other excuses they want to make for being weak.
Yeah.
But when we say might is right, it applies to everything. It happens to be a philosophy or universal I very much agree with. But its applications, I think, are lost on either a weak, unintelligent, ignorant, or just uninterested, critic. What is opening a door, if not the manifestation of our power over a doorknob?
Correct. Yeah.
What is walking down a field, if not a representation of our power to navigate and ambulate over a terrain? What is anything we ever do, if not a representation of our ability to use our personal strength to do so? And in the face of failure, not a commentary on how we lack the strength to make it happen.
True. Yeah.
So when we say might is right, it's universal in its application, and you can't be bogged down, or I guess I would contend that you should not be bogged down by a lack of creativity in its application when you are trying to understand it. Might is right. Oh, that means hitting people over the head with axes. Sometimes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Respect the axe.
Respecttheaxe.com. But
Yeah.
might is right is any really ode to the very widely accepted notion that being weak doesn't win any conflict.
It does not.
A war of attrition is still a war fought rejecting weakness.
It is.
Any application of might is right when applied to your life will show you that there is power to be gained. And Ragnar Redbeard did an incredible job of making a case for it in this book. I would say that, everybody should read that book at some point.
I like the natural law is tooth and claw. All else is error.
All else is error.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I put it on the back of the shirt.
You did. It's awesome. That's my favorite quote, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty solid.
Yeah.
It's pretty solid.
That's
So pressure player, Ragnar Redbeard.
awesome.
The unicorn.
We had a bunch of different options for this one.
Yeah, a bunch of different options. I decided to go with a category because I could articulate a position.
Categories are good.
Categories are good.
Yeah.
They're effective.
Yep.
Career politicians.
Yeah.
So I don't mean the guy who locally has had enough and ran
I'm
for
mad as
office.
hell, and I'm not
Mad as hell, right?
not gonna take it anymore.
I'm not talking about that guy because that guy is more often not the representation of what a politician should be. I'm talking about the people who make a career out of convincing people that they will adopt and modify the ethics to accommodate the morals.
Yeah.
I want to make the world better for you. I'm not following a standard that may exclude you. I'm not following a standard that may force you to become stronger or modify your own morality. No, what I'm going to do is make sure you understand that I will take the ethics of this great body of people for which I am running for office, and I will chop it down to fit your view of the world. This is what career politicians do.
One size fits all.
It's the only way they can be a career politician.
Or they wouldn't last.
The saying goes, and I don't know who said it, but it's certainly been said plenty of times. Sometimes, trying to help me through a perceived, time of adversity and conflict. They tell me, if you don't have any enemies, that means you've never stood for anything.
Yeah.
And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But how could you be a career politician if you are going to go against the grain at least half the time? Well, it's very easy. You make sure you always go with the grain. And if you're always going with the grain, that you are completely ignoring the progress that occurs when we maintain a level of consistency that allows us the sort of metrics by which we adopt and improve our views.
Yeah.
We say prostitutes are women who will love you in between loving the last guy and in between loving the next guy.
Yeah.
And they will do it for a price.
They will.
And this is what career politicians are. Career politicians are those who sell you the idea of complete compatibility.
As long as the check clears.
As long as the check clears.
Yep.
So long as you elect them, they will say whatever you want them to say. They are the prostitute.
100%.
That's who they are. The prostitute's job is not to to criticize you. The prostitute's job is not to hold you accountable or obligate you to any moral standard. No, the prostitute's job is to say, my ethics, the ethics of this world, are completely compatible with your morals. And I am here to prove this to you.
Yeah.
And you will pay me for doing it.
100%.
And that's what career politicians are. So career politicians, and you'll see this too with celebrities.
Yeah,
Just because you're not a politician that holds office, don't think that people like Angelina Jolie, Sean Penn, Bono, all these other fucktard court jesters, don't think that they're not career politicians. Because what they do is they sell people the notion that the ethics of the group needs to fit the morals of the individual. Being consistent is how one finds the right tribe.
True. Yeah.
Nature will dictate whether your ethics as a tribe are valid. In the leaves of society, they no longer have to touch the ground of reality.
True. They don't. They have no knowledge of it.
The people that have come before them have done that for them. But what happens eventually is the tree starts to wither the weaker that the foundation gets. And the leaves eventually fall from the tree. And then they find what it is like to have to survive on the ground.
Yeah.
And that is the test that one's morality and the group's ethics have to pass.
Correct. Yeah.
All right, Pat.
Awesome.
Morals, ethics, and what is right. Break it down.
Okay. So, great episode describing this. A lot of people get confused with this. They think they're the same thing. There's debates on what's moral versus ethics. I think this is a pretty clear determination. Individually, those are your morals. The group, those are the ethics. If you find yourself in a group where it's incompatible with your morals, find a different group. You know, you're only going to do a disservice to the group at large if you stick around and try to make it fit, or you try to, force yourself into that group. Because what happens is over time you'll gain status, and with that status you'll gain a certain, sense for the new guys to look at you and be, okay, this guy's a leader. If you are the whole time not incongruent with what's going on with the group, you're doing a disservice to the entire group, because the new guys look at you and they say, oh, that's what the leader's supposed to be. That's what someone higher up's supposed to be. And you're not. So as soon as you realize that you're incongruent with the group, do the right thing, make your exit, make it quick, and make it seamless and painless so that you don't have to worry about anything, and you find a new group that fits with what you're into.
Well said. If we're looking at our ability as an individual to survive in many different environments, we're not going to say that learning how to hunt is immoral. We're not going to say that learning how to farm is immoral. We're not going to say that learning how to kill is immoral. If that is the standard by which we're looking to succeed. Being that that's the case, finding a group that is compatible in its dealings and positions towards those different endeavors is in our best interests. Well, nowadays, you have people who are no longer in need of the ability of hunting. They no longer feel the need to learn how to kill another person, how to farm even, how to build, how to fix something. Because their lives are so compartmentalized in our reality that they will go their entire lives without having to do any of those things.
Yeah.
The problem occurs when those people ignore that those things still exist. People say, I'm often called, violent. Why are you always so worried about violence and killing and all this stuff? I've never killed anybody. Am I violent? Sure, I'm violent, but I'm violent in the context of what I do. But why is it that I retain this aspect of my identity and adjust my morality accordingly? Because I respect the world I live in enough to know that at a moment's notice, I, who am charged with the safety and success of my children, of my wife, of my tribe, I understand that obligates me to prepare not only for the things in front of me, but for the things that could potentially find themselves in my path. I will not agree with the morality that ignores that. I will not agree with the morality that reduces one's obligation to fulfilling their own personal potential. I know that there are plenty of groups I don't fit in. And I'm willing to say that there are groups that I don't fit in that are, by and large, powerful groups. That are groups by any other, system of standards I would give a thumbs up to every day of the week. But not when they reduce your personal power, not when they ignore the fact that strength is a premium, not when they reject the notion that resilience is a commodity in which we will always need to trade. Thank you, folks, for listening to this episode. This is stuff that fits in so powerfully with so many other things that we discuss, so many things that are affecting us nowadays.
Yeah.
The migrants, the invasion.
Yeah, the invading horde.
I've always said good, bad doesn't matter. Incompatibility is what you could hang your hat on.
Two different people fighting over the same resources will always have conflict.
Right. Assuming that they remain as two.
Correct.
And that's where the incompatibility comes in.
Yeah.
It all makes sense, people. They got to fucking listen to me.
It does. It's true. They should listen.
Oh, these fucking guys. All right, folks. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you guys spending time with us. ThePressureProject.com is our website. Info@ThePressureProject.com is our contact email. Check out our membership site at ThePressureProjectMembers.com. And we have a new shirt. I have a new shirt. RespectTheAxe.com will bring you there. Check that out if you can. Thank you, folks. We look forward to speaking to you in the next episode. And as always, brothers, pressure to power.